up and what's good, everybody? It is Sean with 614 Inc. Reviews and How-Tos coming at you today with a how-to video on how to determine which differential you have, which gear oil is right for you, and which method you may want to consider when changing your rear differential gear oil on your Ford F-150. And so I just want to give you my credentials. I am not a certified auto technician by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just an amateur garage mechanic, but I am a contractor, so I'm a very handy guy. And I've always preferred, when doing like routine maintenance stuff, if I can do it on my own with tools that I have in the garage, I've always preferred to do things myself, because my philosophy has always been nobody cares about your vehicle like you do. So while a certified Ford auto technician knows infinitely more than I do about these things, even that considered, I feel like I would do a better job changing my oil or changing my rear diff fluid or changing my brakes than what a Ford technician will, because your vehicle is just another one in a long line of vehicles that they're going to be doing that day. They bust them in and out. It's just one after the next. They don't view your vehicle in the same light you do. And so I'm extremely particular with my truck, and I just like to take my time doing some of these easy critical maintenance issues, like this rear gear oil change, and do them myself, because I feel like even though it's a simple process, it is very important. And I feel like I would take the time and do it more thoroughly and cleanly and precisely than, and no offense to any mechanics out there that might be watching this video, than a mechanic would do just pulling yours in, like I say, in a long line of vehicles that they have to do that day, that have no sentimental value to them, like your own vehicle does to you. And so with that considered, I really started to do some research on how to do this right, how to choose the right gear oil, and how to identify what differential that I even had. And I really found this to be very interesting, which is the whole reason for me making this video, because there was so much misinformation out there and so many arguments about basically three main topics. One, what rear differential do you have? Two, what is the correct way to change the rear differential fluid? And three, the biggest topic out there of argument, what differential fluid to use. And so, first things first, there are three main types of rear differentials that are found on the F-150s. There are the first generation 8.8, there's the second generation Super 8.8, which I found very little information on that subject, and I'll tell you how I stumbled across that in a second. And then there's the 9.75. The process for changing the rear differential gear oil or rear differential fluid, whatever you want to refer to it as, is essentially the same on all three different variations of differential. The differences are going to be what fluid your differential calls for from Ford spec, and if you decide not to use a liquid gasket maker, what gasket you will use. Now, I told you I'm an amateur garage mechanic, but changing my rear differential fluids in my vehicles throughout the years is a process I've done time and time and time again. I am not endorsed by any of the products that we're going to talk about here, but I have found success in using Lube Locker brand rear diff gaskets. I have, knock on wood, never had one leak. And the advantage that I find with using a gasket as compared to something like a Permatex gasket maker, liquid gasket, is one, they're idiot proof. You just slip it right on and line up the bolt holes and stick on your differential, torque it down to spec, and you're good to go. There's no curing process, and you don't have to apply it perfectly to make sure that when you do that initial squish, that everything seals right. Because if you use a liquid gasket maker and you do not apply it correctly and it leaks, some of this rear differential fluid, which we'll talk about in a second, is extremely expensive, and you can cost yourself a lot of money just by having to drain out all your rear differential fluid, because unfortunately there's no other way to correct it other than to rip it down and start again. And so, as I said, I've never had one of these gaskets leak. They're relatively inexpensive, and there's no cure time. That's the other thing that I didn't just touch upon. There's a special process. You have to like torque it down so hard, let it cure, and then torque it down to spec. If you use the liquid gasket maker and fully torque it, it might not properly seal, and then you could be prone to leaks. If you torque it too light or too hard, there's just a lot of human error that can present itself during that process if it's not something that you do every day or have ever done before when using the liquid gasket maker, as compared to a hard gasket like this one here. And so this gives me an opportunity now to talk about the different types of differential. So the first generation 8.8 is shaped like this. It's almost like a square. It's very symmetrical with rounded edges. Now the thing that makes it easy to identify the first generation 8.8 versus the new generation of Super 8.8 are the amount of bolt holes. The Super 8.8 and the 8.8, while they are the same shape, the first generation 8.8 has 10 bolt holes, while the second generation Super 8.8 has 12 bolt holes. Now that seems very easy and straightforward once you know it. The hard part for me was there's very little information out there on the difference between the two, and when searching for this gasket, there's only one company that makes a gasket like this for a Super 8.8, and that is Mag High-Tech. And so anybody that decides to go this route, you are welcome, because I just saved you so much headache from trying to find a supplier out there that sells a hard gasket like this. And the one thing that I will say too is, again, earlier, just to make note, I'm not endorsed by any of these companies. I like Lube Locker products. It was the first one I ever used, and it's the last one I ever used because it's never given me issues. You cannot find a Super 8.8 Lube Locker gasket. However, Lube Locker makes the gaskets exclusively for Mag High-Tech. So even though this gasket is stamped Mag High-Tech, and you can only purchase it from Mag High-Tech, and you can't go on Lube Locker's website and buy a Super 8.8 gasket, this is still a Lube Locker gasket. So it is something that I trust, even though I've never used Mag High-Tech's products before. Like I keep saying, it's made for Mag High-Tech by Lube Locker. Lube Locker or any other gasket that you want to use, you should be able to find a traditional 10 bolt 8.8 and a 9.75 gasket from whatever company with no problem. When you search American Trucks or whatever website you like to buy from, Summit, whatever, they're going to be in abundance. You shouldn't have any issue. So now now that we've identified the different types of gaskets, or I'm sorry, the different types of differentials, the first gen 8.8, the Super 8.8, and the 975. Oh, that's the one thing I didn't talk about. The shape of the 975. So as I just showed you with the gasket, these are pretty much symmetrically shaped with rounded edges. The 975 has a very significant taper that goes off towards the right. So you will see it's got your traditional wide pumpkin, and then it goes down towards the right to a taper. And so if you see something that is not essentially symmetrically shaped that tapers, you know you have the 975. If you see something that is symmetrically shaped with 10 bolts, you know you have the first generation 8.8. If you see something that's symmetrical with 12 bolts, you know you have the super new generation of 8.8. With all of that, when you're armed with that, you can always go to your Ford manual to look up which fluid your vehicle calls for, or rear gear oil your vehicle calls for. However, this is where it got fun. A lot of people have a lot of really emotional opinions when it comes to what gear oil you should use in which differential. Again, your Ford maintenance book or owner's manual is going to tell you your required specifications. I have always personally liked using AMSOIL, Mobil 1, and Royal Purple products. I just feel like they're the three top lubricant oil manufacturers that are out there. And so when I decided to do this, I wanted to use Royal Purple's gear oil. My particular 2016 F150 differential, which is the Super 8.8, specifically calls for a 75W85 premium synthetic hypoid gear lubricant. There are only 3 companies that make that. Royal Purple is not one of them. You can either get it from Ford Motorcraft, Ravenel, or Redline. Those are the only 3 companies out there that make it. And I trust Ford Motorcraft over any of the 2 other companies that make the 7585. I also will let you know that that is about $40 per quart, no matter where you get it from. Amazon, Ford, eBay, wherever. The going rate on this stuff is just under $40. It is very expensive. And so it just, for lack of a better expression, no pun intended, really grinded my gears to have to pay $40 for what I consider to be an inferior oil as compared to Mobil 1, Royal Purple, or AMSOIL. And so what I did was I went ahead and called Royal Purple and AMSOIL both and spoke to their engineers in their customer service department. And they both definitely, exclusively state beyond the shadow of a doubt that their 75 W90 is a perfectly acceptable, viable replacement for the 75 W85 that Ford recommends. Now, the important thing for you to consider is this. Is your vehicle still under warranty? Any change or alteration from what Ford recommends will void your warranty. When I purchase my truck, I purchase an extended service plan. And so if I go to the 7590, I'm going to void my extended warranty because I did not stick to the recommended manufacturer specifications. So unfortunately for me, I have to pay more money to use Ford Motorcraft's oil than what I could buy the 75 W90 for. Upon doing all of that research and making that decision for me, which for me it's a no-brainer, I'm not going to void my warranty. I have no choice. I have to use 7585. But the reason I'm making this video is to give you all of this information that I have accumulated throughout all of this research. I discovered that prior to 2015, all of the Ford first generation 8.8s were recommended from Ford to use 75W140. It wasn't until 2015 that Ford made the switch to the newly recommended 7585. And that's where things got really emotional. People claim that the reason Ford made the switch to 7585 was to squeeze out every little mile per gallon that they could from their vehicles, and that increased fuel economy does not equal increased wear protection, which is what gear oil is all about. And so a lot of people that tow heavy trucks, trailers, campers, whatever have you, they claim that, you know, they'll buy a truck from Ford, drive it 25 miles from the lot to home, take off that rear diff cover, dump out the 7585 that Ford now puts back in their vehicles, and go back to a 75-140 gear oil because they say that the amount of miles per gallon saved by the thinner viscosity gear oil does not justify the amount of wear protection that you gain from the heavier bodied gear oil that the 75-140 gives you. And so I just wanted to give you guys all of that information and, you know, let you know all these things that I discovered throughout my research, and maybe they will help you make your decision. And so again, you know, we went over the 3 different types of differentials and how to identify them. We went over the different gaskets you can use and where to purchase them from, and, you know, make sure that if you have that Super 8.8, because I almost bought the 10 bolt and then I just kept looking at it and I'm like, that doesn't look right. And then through doing research, found out that, well, that's why you have the first gen and the second gen and they're different bolt patterns. And so, you know, Mag High Tech is the only company. If you do have that Super 8.8 and do want to use the gasket, there's your information there. And again, if you have an extended warranty or a manufacturer warranty still in place and you do want to do this, make sure you stick with what Ford recommends for your vehicle. I also, you know, saw videos where people talked about Ford has superseded, no matter what your manual calls for, the 7585 and gone back to the 75-140. That is a myth. That is debunked. I called Ford and I grilled them and, you know, set up an appointment to have mine done and asked them to ask the advisor what materials we were going to use. And when they told me, they said 7585. I later canceled the appointment. I was just trying to verify what Ford was going to put in my vehicle. And so again, all of the information that you're getting here has been fully vetted. Instead of just taking somebody's word for it on a forum, I called Royal Purple, I called AMSOIL, I called Ford, I read my manual. Everything that I am telling you has been vetted. And so, you know, there are a lot of things here, like I say, the difference between going back to that 75-140 versus the 75-85, that are, you know, your judgment call on whether or not, you know, you want to go against manufacturer specifications and, you know, possibly save yourself some premature wear on your gears if you are doing heavy towing. You know, it's a decision that only you can make. I am not advocating one way or the other. I just wanted to put this video out there to make it a one-stop shop for, you know, all the information. And then the last thing I'll say before we sign off is the new differentials, a lot of them come now with e-lockers. And what an e-locker or an electronic locking differential is you have the 4x4 on the fly now. You have the knob where when you're driving you can twist it and shift between different selections of what 4x4 mode you want to run your vehicle in. If your dial pulls to electronically lock your rear differential, you have what is referred to as e-lockers. You do not need friction modifier anymore. I'm a Mustang guy, and the old 8.8 limited slip differentials, you needed to add a small bottle of friction modifier to your gear oil. With the new e-lockers, they no longer require friction modifier, so you're good to run straight gear oil. If you run something like Royal Purple or Mobil 1, a lot of times it has friction modifier pre-packed into the gear oil already. Do not let that be a deterrent from you, even if you have an e-locker. If the friction modifier is in there, it will not harm an electronic locking differential. The other thing that I found through my research and through talking to Royal Purple's engineering technicians is that they cannot tell you how much friction modifier comes pre-packed in their quarts of gear oil. They say that they make it in bulk, and then they just add an arbitrary amount of friction modifier to the large batches of oil and then individually pack it in quarts. So after that process is done, they're like, we've never done the calculations to determine how much friction modifier actually finds itself in each bottle. They say that the consistency from one bottle to the next is exactly the same because it gets blended in there evenly, but they don't know what it breaks down to. And so through trial and error, and this doesn't go with the F150s, but I do briefly want to touch on it since we're talking about it. I did have an 8.8 limited slip diff on a Mustang where I just put straight Royal Purple in that had it pre-packed with friction modifier. I did not add any additional friction modifier in, and I didn't have any problems with gear chatter. You hear a lot of times people talk about experiencing gear chatter, and I think based on my personal experience and everything that I've read, it's just a case-by-case basis. And so if you want to put it in without adding any additional friction modifier, since it already is in there, you can always drive it. If you do experience gear chatter, you can always add more friction modifier in. But it is from my personal experience with an 8.8 limited slip on a Mustang using Royal Purple pre-packaged with friction modifier that I didn't require any additional friction modifier. Like I say, if you have an electronic locking differential, you do not require friction modifier, so it's not something that you have to worry about. I've read forum after forum of people that put it in anyways, and people yelling at them because they're just wasting money, and the people saying, well, it didn't cause any problems. And from what I've read and understand, it won't cause any problems, but like those people that are pounding their chest yelling, it's just a waste of money. It is definitely not required. Ford will even tell you you do not need the friction modifier with the e-locker. So if you want peace of mind and you don't mind throwing money away, go ahead. It won't hurt anything, but it is not required. So I hope you guys like this. I hope you found it useful. I hope I didn't ramble on and go over too much stuff, but I wish I had a video like this when I was researching how to do this, because I did hours and hours of research, and everything I discovered I just presented you in a one-stop shop. And so again, thank you for your support. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and tune into the channel again, because I am going to be posting a how-to video again very soon on the actual process. And when I do remove my rear differential cover, I'm going to use this opportunity to make lemonade out of lemons, and I'm going to go ahead and paint the rear diff cover while I have it off. And so like I say, you know, that's one of those things that you can benefit from by not having Ford do it and doing something like this yourself. If you like to modify your vehicle and make it unique like I do, this is a perfect opportunity to save some money on the service, pay a little bit more attention to detail than what maybe somebody else working on your car might do, and you know, add a little bit of your own personal touch to it as well. And so again, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you on the next one.